I think one of the strong belief systems of the narcissists is that you, whomever you may be, are envious of them. That's something that they seem to need to believe in. It's one of their dogmas, one of their very, very strong points of insistence. But upon reflection and remembering that this is a history channel, I was never even slightly envious of the new modern lifestyle. I really wasn't. I immediately felt it to be deflated of life, lacking in vitality, and lacking in energy, any kind of energy that I might be attracted to. So I didn't have anything, any parasitical attack mechanism working on me from the inside that would have made me feel that I was envious of them. I really absolutely was not. I found it suffocating. I found the whole new modern way of viewing things and experiencing things to be deeply and profoundly uh, painful and problematic and repulsive. I wanted to get back into the wilderness. I wanted to get away from these kinds of human beings because I felt that it was as good as speaking to a shop mannequin as speaking to them. There wasn't anything there to communicate with. There wasn't any spontaneous response. There were probably very predictable, very set responses, but that wasn't what I was looking for. And more than that, I needed something else. I needed more than that. So I never was attracted to that. I was, on the other hand, obligated on a completely different level to try to adapt. That was survival for me. Adaptation to the new situation is, generally speaking, in the normative sense, survival. If you don't adapt, then you really risk your survival. If you do adapt, then you enable it, you make it possible. I was in a survival mode, trying to get a sense of how I could possibly adapt to something plastic, something unrealistic, something utterly fake in my view. And the sign that it was fake, the really strong signal was right from the beginning that people thought that I should acknowledge that I was privileged when I knew from my experience that my lifestyle, my existence beforehand hadn't been that way, or at least that there was a deep chasm in communication between what modern people termed privileged and any possible means that I had of ascertaining it. Uh, it just wasn't an automatic message to me, just didn't communicate well. And I would say mostly because I hadn't been privileged. I hadn't had many benefits. I had had corporal punishment. I had had very strict and regimented upbringing. I had had access to the wilderness, which really isn't a privilege unless you like that sort of thing, and moderns didn't, and dogs in a manger. And I hadn't had financial benefits. I had been basically living on hand-downs, hand-me-downs, clothing from other children. I didn't have anything new except maybe my school uniform, which wasn't that fancy. On a very, very rare occasion, I might get something that was new, but that was about once every 5 years. That wasn't really that often. I'd get a pair of jeans or some new shoes. That wasn't really that often. So the assertion and the uh, very condemning uh, proclamation that I was privileged was by most measures, utterly false, unless you count the spiritual dimension, which is, as I say, would be the access to the wilderness, which actually most modern people really wouldn't understand and don't want. I've seen those modern people. I've seen them. When I had the opportunity to finally go to Kruger National Park, we saw them, and all of us people who were Africans, even though white, we said to each other, goodness me, those Americans, they're wearing loud shirts on a safari. Don't they know anything? It's scaring to the animals. Now we know that Americans just like to go to the bush for canned shoots and shoot something dead. That's their ultimate desire. That's their fetish. But back then it was a problem of wearing loud shirts. It showed a lack of intuition. It showed the incorrect level of sensitivity to the bush. But we know that Americans don't care for anything termed sensitivity, because sensitivity to them implies weakness. To us, it implied attunement and strength. But they had a different ideology, and I think really still do, except it's gotten worse. I remember also, just by the by, and not really relevant to this, but we were at the Lion and Cheetah Park, and there was an older woman, like in her older years, maybe, I think, 55, 60, but very old in demeanor and sort of semi-crippled, I suppose. And I was 15 or so, no, earlier, younger, probably 13. And she was going to the kiosk where there isn't much because it's Africa, and she was saying, I want some carbonated water. Anything else will make me sick. I want carbonated. He doesn't know what carbonated water is. And she's sort of trying to get us to help her. It's like, can you tell him I want carbonated water? And it was like, I don't know if that wasn't really quite her accent, but it was really insistent, very loud, very grating. Not like we colonials were taught to speak, which was very soft and not that pushy. And I think I finally found she said, it's got bubbles in. I can't. Actually, she couldn't have water with. She wanted non-carbonated. Anyway, she couldn't have water with bubbles in it, so she would make her sick. So we had to request on her behalf, please, can she have water without the bubbles in it? The guy behind the desk finally pulled something. You want this one? Yes, I'll have that one. So, finally she was happy. But Americans, the loud American, the ugly American, those were not stereotypes. Those were the reality, even from my childhood. The ugly American, the loud American, the grating American. We had one time a person that came from Canada, and she was kind of, in her way, self-righteous too. She was like taking pictures of all the people living in huts, people that lived in Zimbabwe. That was at that time probably Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, sort of opening up to the free world. And she said, this is really radical. I'm taking pictures of people living there in their houses, their huts. My father said, well, my father, who had lived there all his life, and his familial lineage had come from Africa, he said, well, to us it's just convention, it's not exotic, but she seems to like it, so we will indulge her. And we did. We would indulge these Westerners, but we knew that they didn't belong because they hadn't got the adequate sensitivity to the environment, which meant environmental sensitivity, which meant cultural awareness of the political dynamics and the reality of those, which were tense, and not to be just simply denied or overlooked on the basis of political correctness, and which meant a sense of belonging to the environment because we had invested in it. We had deeply and profoundly invested in being there in Africa. And they didn't have any of that. They were just kind of, we'll come in, we go out, we'll make our sort of quasi-artistic, quasi-political statements, but American art and American politics. are superficial, especially if imposed from the outside. American levels of understanding are greatly in they're greatly in overreach mode. They never were true to the circumstances. They never were accurate to the circumstances. They were always really in the sense of we're coming in as a corrective. We're coming in as people who can really see what should be done. We're very great humanitarians, very realistic, except that they were not political realists, not realists in the sense of having any sensitivity to the environment, just the opposite, just kind of bombastically barging their way in, taking photographs or gaining impressions and then reporting them back, but all in a mode that it was extremely superficial. And this was during the changeover from the Rhodesian regime to the Zimbabwe Rhodesia regime, which was under Bishop Abel Muzorewa. This was a transitional time for about 8 or 9 months, and these foreigners came in. So what is really needed for a deep level of understanding of a situation is a culturally, politically, and environmentally attuned sensitivity. But you need to ideally have been brought up in the place or have spent considerable periods of your life in that place to have developed that. The modern character wants to short-circuit that, they want to shortcut that, and they want to say, well, I'm just here I am. If you don't embrace me, you are the bigot. If you don't embrace me, there is something wrong with you. Maybe you are the one that's set in your ways. Maybe you are the dogmatic one. Maybe you are the one that won't change. They love to play that game. That's part of their self-righteous morality, their hypermoralism, which I sure hope goes out of the picture very soon after Donald Trump fizzles, or maybe after he reaches his triumph and people have to deal with their own projections about reality in having created a monster that they now need to accept and treat with due respect as the monster that they most desired, as the monster that they intended on creating, and now have to embrace due to the fact that they created it. So it goes. There is a difference between the state of being that is narcissistic and which is inclined to embrace the world on the basis of a fantasy and on the basis of good acting skills. And there is a difference between that and embracing reality as it is organically. Even the concept of organic reality, it's very, very, very hard for a modern to even begin to grasp. They can grasp a synthesized reality, which means that a reality that's kind of really constructed from their own fantasy and from their own intentions. They can't grasp a reality that's more organic, that is actually true despite the fantasy, in resistance to their fantasy. They can't grasp that, and that's what the issue was that I first noticed when I saw these modelers come into Zimbabwe Rhodesia in 1979-80. That's what I first noticed. I sensed it very, very acutely. So like I say, I've never admired them. I've never wanted to be them. That's the narcissist's fantasy, that I envy them and I want to be them. You would want to be a plastic shop mannequin? Really? Is there some advantage in that? You would want to be something that is dead from within? There is really something in that follows a particular cycle that is anything but rewarding. the cycle of love bombing and then backstabbing and then love bombing and backstabbing. You'd want to be that. I never felt it. Always felt it was fake, always knew it was fake, but I was compelled on the basis of survival to try, nonetheless, to find a way to fit in and conform with Western society. That was my most profound difficulty, to try to do something that I knew wasn't likable, wasn't admirable, wasn't attractive, but was to do with my survival. Very, very tough for me. And just as a final 2 points, perhaps, some of the ways that I seem to provoke people, despite my desire to fit in and conform and really try to be a modern Westerner, was that I generally had this bad habit, which actually is a very good habit and very realistic habit, of referring to a reality outside my head. That always seemed to eventually provoke people. There's a reality outside my head. I'd try and say, look, this situation is like this, that situation is like that, and referring to my observations, which I assumed were other people's observations, or at least available to them. That used to inflame them. Whoa, don't do that. The other thing was encouraging their creativity. So you could be creative. You might have something on the inside. That used to inflame them, because obviously they didn't. They had chosen a path of falseness and manipulation, which means you're not going to be creative. You're going to do whatever is politically expedient, even on the small, narrow social level, still politically expedient. So if I would try to draw out their creativity, that would cause an attack. So there were quite a few things, but those 2 things, I guess, in general, which would incite people to attack me. One is reference to an objective reality, something that could be a commonly shared reality outside of our heads. They would attack me on that basis. Oh, she's different from us. She's not playing the game. She's making me feel uncomfortable because I don't really have any sense of reality that's outside of my head. It's really a shocking idea. It's a shocking suggestion, and it's a pressure. And it's putting me through some kind of hoops that I don't really understand. And then, also, I'm sure you can be creative. No, they can't be creative because there's much less in their mind, I suppose, to be gained in being creative compared to manipulating other people and putting on the particular mask that makes other people feel beholden and feel guilty or somehow attached in a way that would make them pretty much in a mode of servitude to the masked one, the child usually, the infant. I mean, the infant in many, many senses, but sometimes actually a child, sometimes an adult, an actual adult as a child. That's, real creativity is a sacrifice. But manipulation is cheap. Manipulation can always be tried, and it's actually socially condoned in Western modernity, and it's not risky. And it's, as I say, it's cheap and it's not risky. So yeah, that's very much of a attraction to the modern type. So just a few thoughts for you.
By this proclamation, adopt, enact, and give to the people of Rhodesia the Constitution annexed hereto. God save the Queen.